tell you what I believe in. When I was growing up, I would always put myself in the shoes of my literary heroines. What would Elizabeth Bennet do when faced with a choice between staying at home and going away to another city to study if college had been a choice for young women in Jane Austen's England? Elizabeth Bennet, anyone? Pride and Prejudice. What would Jo March do when faced with a choice of working for a company or sticking out on her own? Would she devote herself to the company as she did to stodgy old Professor Bear, or live an exciting continental adventure with Teddy? Jo March, anyone? Little Women, Louisa May Alcott. What would Katharine Earnshaw do for love? Go with Heathcliff, all rage and madness, or Edgar Linton, all posh and polite? That's Wuthering Heights. As I grew older, my heroines changed until I finally found the perfect fit. Nora Ephron, you may know her from movies such as Sleepless in Seattle and When Harry Met Sally, but she's also written some remarkable books, including things like I Feel Bad About My Neck, which is all about aging. Everything is copy, she wrote, and it was to me. Life, movies, television, politics, as I staggered from one deadline to another, moving from handling the front page of a national newspaper in New Delhi to launching a city newspaper in Mumbai, to running a Sunday newspaper, to eventually editing a news magazine in the run-up to the most definitive general election of our times. What would Nora do? That became my mantra whenever I was in doubt over issues big and small, from handbags to husbands to necklines to nail paint. Increasingly, through my 31 years of active 9 to 5, or shall I say 11 to 11 workday, because that's what journalism is about, I got asked so many questions. Not all of them were flattering. Oh, what do you do with your boys when you're at work? I felt like telling them I eat them for lunch. What time do you get home? When do they see you? How do you manage? And of course, my favorite, why don't you take some time off? You can always get back to work. Most often, it was other working parents who asked me these questions. Teachers in my boys' school, they were working mothers too. Senior journalists who also had children, relatives, acquaintances, just about everyone. Anytime my older boy got into a fight in school, it was because I was working. Anytime my younger boy didn't do as well as expected in a test, it was because I was working. Anytime my husband had a health issue, it was because I was working. I was judged at work, often insulted in school, and always marked out. I almost felt like the new girl in school, always bullied. As I rose in my profession, I found myself trying to ensure working moms didn't quit. That became an obsession with me. In an increasingly corporatized environment, which enforced 8-hour workdays, I found myself fighting a pretty losing battle to allow new mothers to work from home, to enable mothers with exam-taking children to take sabbaticals, and to ensure that they didn't miss deadlines even if they didn't show up in office. Technology helped, thank God. As smartphones replaced landlines, Quark made way for InDesign, and WhatsApp groups replaced physical meetings, though not as much as I would have liked. When I finally quit the 5-day week workforce in January this year, I decided to write a book that would give all the advice I had ever wanted when I was struggling for answers. Those nights of screaming silently at the world, days of handling an ill child and a demanding boss, of cutting short a family holiday to be at a work emergency, or of not being at home when a major accident involving one of my boys got him 42 stitches. That was a nightmare. Amazingly, I found among all the successful women I interviewed for this book, echoes of my own insecurities and inadequacies, and that was truly surprising to me. I found Naina Lal Kidwai, possibly the first woman banker I'd ever heard of. She had her own struggles with the boardroom, including the fact that she had to wear a sari, and she hadn't worn a sari before, and she put so many pins in it that she couldn't actually sit down at the board meeting. And she had to negotiate for a salary for a job that a woman had never had. She was always happy to find help wherever she could, whether it was gravitating towards the ladies section of the party to check out the latest after-school, after-class entertainment option for her daughter, or whether it was, remember this was much before the WhatsApp mommy groups, or whether it was asking help from her boss's wife, who kept an eye on her daughter's nanny while they were playing. They both shared the same Mumbai apartment complex. That was lesson number 1 for me. You can't do it alone. Ask for help and you will get it. There was Vanita Narayan. She headed IBM in India. She started her working life, surprisingly, as a sales clerk in a Houston departmental store, earning $3.50, learning everything and talking about everything about home linen, from dust ruffles to runners, because she was keen to get into the workforce, and that was the only job available in America, despite her Indian degree. Later, after her child was born, and she had an MBA degree from America, she was an IBM on the up and up, but her struggle didn't stop when she had her baby. Her husband decided to look after her and stayed home while she worked away. Lesson number 2, never, ever stop working. I found director Farah Khan regaling me with stories of times when she would have to hold her pee all day long because there was no washroom in the studios in those times. Or times when heroines had to change costumes behind curtains because there were no makeup vans in those days. She told me of her survival mantra: prepare your children, and she has 3 of them, to face the world as it is and then let them fly. Lesson number 3, don't be a control freak, learn to let go. There was designer Anita Domre. She told me of what she had learned from her aunts when she would go to her or come to her grandparents' home in this very city in Jaipur. How to work together in harmony, whether it was cooking or sewing or cleaning or telling stories to children. Lesson number 4, the power of collaboration. There is no work like teamwork. And there was my favorite, Sudha Murthy, whose 10,000 rupee saving started off Infosys, but being told by her husband that he didn't want her to work at the company because both of them couldn't possibly, who would look after the children? She was disappointed, obviously, but not heartbroken, taking to teaching and then writing and philanthropy. Lesson number 5, when one door closes, another one opens. There were many others who went into the book, which eventually got called No Regrets, The Guilt-Free Woman's Guide to a Good Life, thanks to its commissioning editor, who also became a mum at 45 and got to experience all the thrills and spills of childbearing and child-rearing. Through sleepless nights, she held my hand long distance, reading the manuscript, suggesting changes, throwing out nonsense, and retaining what I hoped would make sense. And oddly, while asking myself the question that put me on the path of writing for a living, what would Nora do? I found myself answering, do what my mother did. In seeking answers from the famous and successful, I'd forgotten the woman who had made me, my mother, whose example I had subconsciously tried to follow. A young woman, married at 19, who came to Delhi from Srinagar, who had her babies early, and then spent most of her youth ensuring they woke up in time for her to walk them to the bus stop every morning, go to school, get picked up by her in the afternoon, eat the lunch she had cooked, be allowed to play where she rested for a bit, then do homework under her watchful eye while she made dinner, be given a midweek treat to watch Chitrahar if we'd been good, and then be packed off to repeat the cycle, packed off to bed to repeat the cycle the very next day. Just talking about it tires me. I saw her coping with demanding in-laws who would invite themselves over for weekend dinners, relatives from Kashmir who would stay in Delhi to avoid the long, cruel Kashmir winters, and with limited resources as demands increased. I remembered her single-minded dedication to both my brother and I getting a good education, and recall never ever being treated differently because of my gender. I remember for many years being the only girl in my class whose parents didn't have a car and who happily wore her trendy neighbor's hand-me-downs, yet never feeling deprived or inferior. And I realized my mother had taught me the biggest and the greatest lesson of them all. All mothers are working all the time. Some get paid, some don't. Some get praised, some don't. Some become famous, some don't. But all of them deserve to be emulated. Their hard work, their discipline, their ability to have fun, and above all, the ability to make a little go a long way. So to the teenager who once dreamed of doing what Nora did, I can quite confidently say this to all the teenagers here today. Do what your mother did. If I had to do it all again, I would too. To all the mothers, daughters, and sons, and future mothers and fathers, my salams and all the best.